Welcome to our new podcast, Herbonomics on Cannabis Tech. We are absolutely thrilled to announce this new monthly series where we're going to take a step beyond the health and wellness topics that we typically talk about of hemp. We're going to skip over that CBD craze, and we're going to take a deeper dive into the world of hemp manufacturing. Now, for this show, I have actually asked for a co-host, and we are going to bring on Tony Solano, who is the founder for iHemp Manufacturing. Now, Tony's originally from Colorado. He got involved in the hemp industry through the Industrial Hemp Committee with the Department of Agriculture, and through that role, he has discovered an incredible amount of possibility in creating products from hemp. Tony, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to this podcast every month.
Yay, let's see where it takes us.
Definitely.
We can find out how it's made.
Right? And there's just so much possibility. And I feel like a lot of times in the cannabis space or in the hemp space, we have a tendency to look at just things like cannabinoids and health benefits and how it interacts with the body. But there's so much more to hemp, and there's so much more that we could be doing with hemp. And I love the fact that we're going to take some time to actually sit and talk about these things, and hopefully maybe churn up a little of that discussion, and hopefully plant a few ideas. And let's see what we can do to help expand our footprint in hemp manufacturing.
I agree. Thank you for having me. Excited to start going down this road and have some of these other conversations. And we can share with folks that, yes, you can go beyond, seeing it, smelling it, smoking it, rubbing it on, eating it, and various other applications.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive into the topic of the hour and talk about this podcast more that we're going to do, let's qualify you. Let's talk about iHemp. I know that you have been involved in several facets of hemp manufacturing, but talk a little bit for our audience about where that passion actually comes from for hemp production.
Sure. Before I got into this space a little over 10 years ago, I was a vice president of business development for a large content production company leading up to the sell-off to a publishing entity. At the same time, my father was suffering from prostate cancer. So right after the company I was working for was acquired, I decided that I needed to write the next chapter in my life, and I wanted to go back home to Colorado and support my father through the end-of-life transition. And he had a lot of complaints about the side effects from big pharma opioids. And he was constantly asking me, son, I'm reading all these things about alternative medicine. Please help me find something different. And I said, great, Dad. What are you looking at? What are you reading? And then he shared with me everything that he was reading about the world of cannabis. And I wasn't an active smoker or anything at the time. And then he started really focusing in on CBD as a pain management alternative. And I said, okay, so I went through a lot of what he was reading and stumbled across the content around Rick Simpson oil and the potential application to quell some of the issues with cancer. And from there, it was a big investment of the buy and try method. So after months of experimenting with different smokables and then consumables in pill format, gummies, and everything else down the line, ended up experimenting with tinctures after we finally made our way to that form factor and found something that really, really worked for him. And at the time, he was taking liquid morphine and ratcheting up on different micrograms of fentanyl patches. He didn't have a whole lot of wind in his sails for that last stage of life, and the big pharma opioids were really, really putting him to the test. And once we started comparing what the impact was from the CBD tincture, so it was a decent balanced ratio between THC and CBD, we noticed that over a 1 week period of time, in less than 7 days, we were able to reduce his dependency on the big pharma opioids by more than 50%. He had more vitality in his face and his ability to move. He was able to sleep more. keep food down. So he got a whole new breath of life near the end stage. And it really helped to improve his transition into hospice care and take that final stage with a grin and bear it attitude compared to where he was prior to that. And then I started looking at it and started thinking about it. Is there potential broader applications for palliative care? So it made me wonder, where does this come from? Somebody has to grow it. Somebody has to farm it. Somebody has to process it. What are the other things you can do with it? And I said, obviously I'm thinking to myself, if this is going anywhere tracking towards the medical marijuana industry, and if Big Pharma is looking at this, it's going to be commoditized. It's just a matter of time. And obviously with marijuana, that's heavily regulated, licensed, etc. But this was more of an over-the-counter type of approach. So the Colorado Department of Agriculture created the Industrial Hemp Committee. And that was full of a lot of business luminaries from the landscape in Colorado. And one of those individuals happened to own a biorefinery just a little bit north of Denver, who had a long history in processing agricultural offputs. And at the very end of the meeting, he said, I want to figure out how we can take this agricultural byproduct and impact scalable manufacturing practices. I believe that we can do it in a host of ways. And this is where he started running down a list. And on there was plastics. And I had a particular interest and resources in Colorado Springs, and I simply walked up to the gentleman, introduced myself afterwards, and I said, I hear what you're saying. I share your interest, your enthusiasm, and your passion. And if we can do anything to reduce our dependencies on virgin petrochemical compounds in the world of plastics and use this plant matter to do it, I'm very interested in going down that road and finding out what we can do. And here we are near 10 years later with a commercialized solution. And we're actually able to make various types of finished products. One of my particular passion products was an ultimate frisbee, because something that people have to think about in Colorado. I grew up in Colorado Springs. That's where the U.S. Olympic Committee and the training center is based. It's also where you have USA Ultimate Frisbee. And that's on the verge of becoming an Olympic sport. And the world of flying discs is predicated upon virgin plastics. And I said, if I could do one thing of value, let that be it. Let that be my focus. Now, I didn't start out that way. I had to start out as anybody does at a rough and tumble R&D stage. But having access to an injection molding factory in Colorado Springs was the perfect setup. So we started intaking small amounts of that post-processed material. The biorefinery would intake compliant material that was registered through farms, through the CDA, and we would take small amounts of that material delivered to spec, and we would just simply introduce that into the gravimetric feed system for injection molding. And we went from 0 to 0.5% to a 1% mix barrier, and then started producing parts, and something at the same time developed a whole new odor in the plant. And we started looking at the parts that we were producing, and you could clearly see the plant fiber in there. So we had 1,000,001 questions from that point. If we can reach 1%, just how far can we go with this, and what kind of impact can we create? So over a 3.5, 4 year period of time, I completely exhausted my R&D budget, and we kept ratcheting up the percentage of industrial hemp that was in the compound. And then we started looking at types of products that we could make that made sense. And we looked at rolling trays, we looked at 2-piece grinders, we looked at small flower pots. So we started getting creative. And something that a lot of people find in the world of injection molding, having your own tools is a very, very, very expensive proposition. So in the world of injection molding, a lot of people can't keep up with the costs. Sometimes you have businesses that go belly up. So this is where I started to get creative. Instead of investing in the new molds, figured out how to retool existing molds in the library. So I would just call a company and say, hey, if you're not wanting to do anything with your mold, are you willing to donate it to science? Are you willing to sell it at a reduced rate? So we would take some of those and fill it in and then completely retool it to make new parts that we were interested in. And a good example of that was a smoking tip. If you've ever been to a convenience store and you've seen a lot of the tobacco products that have the smoking tips on there, either that are made from plastic that you see in the gutter many times or wood, I figured that could potentially be a product that we could make. And we did. So over a number of years, it was a lot of Wild West, throw whatever you could at the wall, a lot of spaghetti, and see what sticks. And then from there, it's, okay, we can do this. Now, what's next? So that's how it all started, as a byproduct of a family member dealing with a life situation, a physical ailment, leading me to a medical application, wondering if there was more that could be done with this agricultural plant that has been in jail for the last 100 years and that's missing all of this entrepreneurial ingenuity. So that's how I got my start.
I find it absolutely fascinating, the number of stories that are in this industry that start similarly. I feel like there's just so many of us that were kind of drawn here, maybe compelled to come here out of a loved one that needed care, and we're starting to dig into these other solutions and alternatives to pharma. You mentioned your father's bout with cancer. I went through the same thing with my parents and my eldest sister, and that combination of drugs that you talk about, I always called that the death cocktail. I felt like it was the morphine and the Ativan and all of this that they just kept stacking in on top of them that would quiet them down until they actually passed away. And I always felt through all of those experiences, there had to be a better way.
That's the question that doesn't stop.
Right, exactly. And it's just what's amazing to me in all of that is that we come out here, or we come to the cannabis industry with this intent of looking for a solution to something that devastating or that traumatic in our lives, but yet we have this ability to then dig in and really find these other solutions and find the manufacturing solutions and find these different answers to some of these problems that we've had for decades. And it's just amazing to me to learn that there is just so much potential inside this one single plant. Now, one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking about your background and your passion for this, and one of the things that I want to kind of point out is this sports angle that you've taken. So you're not only into the ultimate frisbees and the disc golf frisbees, but you're also doing or working with companies that are making hempwood golf clubs. And so I'm just really curious, I think it's perfect. I think hemp and sports and activity, I think they just naturally kind of go hand to hand, but I would love to hear kind of your perspective on why you feel that these sporting goods are this entry-level window into these everyday items that we see made with hemp.
So the company that I used to work for, the content production company, produced content around exercise science and sports medicine. So I myself am still a competitive athlete in gravity sports. My entire life I've played golf, I've played baseball, I ride skateboards, I like to throw frisbees. And now I have a 3-year-old daughter and I'm teaching her to do all of the same stuff. So when I was there in Colorado going through this process with my father, I was losing him, I was losing a big part of myself and trying to decide, what am I going to do next? Do I just want to go to work for somebody else, or can I write my own ticket? Where does my passion lie? So I've always been able to relate to outdoor recreation, outdoor activities. And when I started going to all the different marijuana shops, especially in 2014 when it became recreational, I started looking at consumer trends. And as time went by, I had to find a crossroads that made sense to me. And I saw that we could make a variety of different products, whether it be plastics or woods or textiles, but what was going to be my focus? So obviously it started out in the arena with plastics. And comparatively speaking to rolling trays or two-piece grinders or some of these other things, I wanted to find something that was an everyday activity that I could share with others, and something that people have been able to relate to for a very long time is obviously a Frisbee. And I've always loved playing that. And it has a tremendous amount of crossover appeal from the mainstream sporting goods product to our subsegment in this market. Because a lot of people, when they're done using it as a Frisbee, they just turn it over and use it as a rolling tray. And I said, okay, great. Let me focus on that one product and let me see what I can do next from there. So the Ultimate Frisbee, as a competitive sport, now they've got college teams. Now Denver even has a professional competitive Ultimate Frisbee team that's part of the U.S. League. And so it's been amazing to see that. At the same time, there's a parallel discipline called disc golf, which is many, many times larger worldwide than the sport of Ultimate Frisbee. It's highly competitive. And another thing is every single one of these competitors carries on average 20 to 30 discs. It's amazing. And I said, okay, Ultimate Frisbee is great, but most of these guys only carry a few of those. So it's in the world of flying discs. It's just a different form factor, and how do we skin that cat? So went from the traditional Ultimate Frisbee to making disc golf units and using various different volumes of hemp material in it, and finding out what we could do with the micronized version versus the short strand fiber versus long strand fiber, and really started to push the limits on what we could make with everyday common household items and sporting good products. Really focused in on the flying disc. Then I figured, what else could I potentially take a look at? Skateboards, skateboard decks. What about baseball bats? What are the other things that I like to do on a regular basis? And golf was a big one. And my weakest point was my putting. And I was familiar with an operation that made exquisite putters out of wood. So wanted to see if I could convert a factory over to hempwood as an alternative feedstock. And that's how I learned how to make putters and started substituting, instead of traditional exotic hardwoods, started using hempwood as an alternative. And that's how started making the hempwood putters. And now we're also looking at other sports. If you're familiar with pickleball, it's a smaller version of tennis, and you use a paddle. So we're making prototypes with hempwood right now. So we're constantly trying to explore everyday products, whether it be sporting goods or household items. Another good example is something else that I relate to is music. And I bought a hempwood guitar. And I went to an expo and I put the guitar on display, and I didn't like the aluminum stand. I didn't feel like it really blended with what I was trying to focus on and the point I was trying to make. So I went back to another factory that I work with, and I said, hey, let's start making guitar stands out of hempwood to accentuate the guitar. And then, along with guitars go music, alcohol, smoking. So it started coming up with the ideas around beer taps and coasters and other potential applications. Now it's cigar boxes. So there is a long list of products that are in the world of sporting goods, as well as music and day-to-day activity, and complementary to your regular day-to-day activity as a consumer, whether you're smoking it or what have you, even if it's a cutting board or a cheese board or a display board. finding relative things that we can do to compete with everyday consumer goods, whether it's made out of plastic, or it's made out of wood, or it's made out of textiles that can involve hemp. So it just, you pointed out that question. What else can we do? What else is this good for? So that's that same question that is constantly plays over and over every day in the back of the mind. What else can we do with this plant matter? So we're constantly trying to discover relative applications that make sense and can deliver a competitive value as well as unique features into the marketplace and not just in sporting goods.
Right. And, one of the things that, kept coming back to me while you were talking just there is that these really are everyday items. I mean, okay, I'm a little biased. Yes, we have a disc golf course, so disc golf discs are an everyday item in my house. But in terms of all of the other things, the fabrics and the coasters and the smoking tips and cigar boxes and all of these different things, there's just so much potential for the things that can be made from hemp. And then with my mind, how that process is, okay, so if we're going to start producing these things with hemp and we have the infrastructure and the ability to do it here in the United States, then we start losing that dependency on importing so much, and we start losing some of these supply chain issues that we have, and we can start rejuvenating American manufacturing. And my brain just gets in this mode where I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And it's just
ding,
so
ding,
much fun for me to be able to see these things, really starting to take hold, and people really starting to kind of demand, I think, that we look at these alternative solutions and that we start to look for alternatives for a lot of these products that we have gotten so used to seeing that little made in elsewhere stamp on them. I think it's just proof to the opportunity that we have.
That's one of my biggest drivers, hands down. I get tired of having all of these external dependencies. I want to know, what can I do myself? I don't want to go out of state, let alone out of country, let alone out of North America. And especially now with the global supply chain meltdown and the problems that it creates. At the end of the day, we're talking about feedstock that essentially is nothing more than a weed that anybody could grow in their backyard if they wanted to. And what are the things that we can do with that? And with the flying discs, we've proven the capacity, starting with plastics, that we can go from farm to factory to finished goods, all with the smallest footprint, the least amount of human capital involved, the least amount of carbon emissions, and without having to create any external dependencies.
Right. And with the crop that requires very little, it doesn't require the water usage that a lot of crops have. It doesn't require, the care and the pesticides and the herbicides and all of these other things, to be grown.
Now you're getting into regenerative agriculture and carbon sequestration, and the fact that you can go from seed to finished product inside of a 180-day period, unlike, commoditized lumber, which could take 40 to 80 years in some cases.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And the potential is just so limitless. It's almost hard to fathom, I think, sometimes. Now, I want to talk about our show, and I want to talk about the things that we're going to be talking about over the next, several months as we kind of extend this podcast out. But real quick, and I'm going to give you a chance to do this again at the end of the show, but if somebody is interested in producing a hemp product and maybe they would like to reach out to you and get some more information, or, maybe even, hire you to make some discs for them, how would they go about getting a hold of you, Tony, to set up that conversation?
So there's two ways. Number one, visit the website, ihempmfg.com. And then number two is just send me an email, Tony, Tony, at ihempmfg.com. Very simple. Fantastic.
So let's talk about the show. Clearly, If I'm going to have a podcast about hemp technology and hemp production, I honestly couldn't ask for a better co-host. So first off, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join us here and talk about these things, because I just don't feel like we really do talk about them enough. But let's talk about what we're going to talk about in future episodes and talk about our guests. Now, I've kind of broken this down into kind of 4 categories, I think, of where we're going to try to go with a lot of these episodes. And one is the people. So obviously, you have an incredible network that you've built throughout your career. And with all of these people kind of forging forward in this quest for something a little more eco-friendly and for these everyday products, and like we just discussed, kind of rejuvenating American manufacturing. A couple of the names that we had talked about and we'd mentioned, is Bo Whitney, who is the chief economist at the NCIA, or the National Cannabis Industry Association. Again, I think the conversation there is going to be absolutely phenomenal. We also have talked about Greg Wilson, who is the founder at Hempwood, Aaron Rydell, who is the co-founder of Hemp Engineered Manufacturing Products. So these are all people that are very deeply ingrained in this industry, and I think it's going to be very fascinating to talk to them about how they are going about, really invigorating this industrial hemp market.
They're all great people, and they're the ones that I learned from, because I don't have all the answers. So we have to come together and figure things out and create alternatives and design. First off, we have to discover what it is that we're doing. Then we have to design a solution. Then we have to deliver that into the marketplace. And the only way we can do that is together. And as Rachel Berry from the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, I always come back to this great quote that she has. It's not a commodity crop, it's a community crop. And by all of us working together, we can do better, lifting each other up.
Most definitely. I like to coin that co-opetition. We've been so focused on competition for so long and trying to keep the other guy down, whereas I feel like if we cooperate and kind of help each other through this, that we all kind of have that ability to rise up to the occasion and do some really phenomenal things. Now, in addition to the people, we're going to talk about the processes. We're going to talk about products. We're going to talk about the places. So we're going to talk about events and functions and conferences and things that are happening in hemp manufacturing. It's definitely going to be a fun podcast. We're going to have a lot of information. We're going to deep dive into a lot of different things, and hopefully, our conversations can generate some of that curiosity that really kind of spawns creativity, spawns innovation, and helps, advance, really, I think, what we're all trying to do here with the hemp industry. But I would love for you, Tony, to tell our audience, who are we going to start with? Who's going to be on the podcast next month?
So we're going to start off with Bo Whitney from Whitney Economics. And I think it's really, really important to give people a context, what hemp is good for and what the economic outlook is. And what are some particular areas to take into consideration? Is there information about what it looks like as a CBD product? Great. What about economics around, manufacturing of hempwood products? Could it be used in construction? People are always looking for the next best thing, and they're looking for those leading economic indicators. And before we go off on 100 different tangents on making products, we have to take a look at the broader market overall and decide where the prevailing winds are going to drive us to. So that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to put Bo front and center on this next podcast as a guest, to talk about the entire context of economics that surround the world of hemp and look at some of his data and those reference points and help give people a better understanding of just how to look at hemp as a valuable alternative commodity crop.
Right. Right. And we know that in our world, especially here in the United States, economics is pretty much a driving force for any new industry. And it's so important. And it really is, you kind of get it from both sides. It's the economics that we receive back, but then there's also the economics, like you talk about, of what's it going to take to put this kind of infrastructure in place, and what do we need to do to build out the hemp industry to where it makes it a viable solution for so many of the things that we have the opportunity to use hemp for. And so I agree with you completely. I think economics is a great place to start, and I can't wait to have that conversation next month with Bo. But before we sign off and before we get started on next month's episode, I want to talk a little bit about your and I's side project that we have coming up this summer in 2022. So for my audience here at Cannabis Tech, I don't talk about my personal life much, but my husband and I, we also own a private disc golf course in the mountains called Skull Ranch. And obviously, when I received the press release from a couple of months ago where Tony was mentioning the disc golf discs, I couldn't help but reach out. And, we can't imagine being here and as involved in the cannabis and hemp industries as we are, not taking the steps to have a hemp-based disc available here at Skull Ranch. So that was something that was super important to me. And of course, when we got to talking, we decided we wanted to do an event. So we volunteered our property, and this August, iHemp Manufacturing and Skull Ranch are teaming up to do an event combining both disc golf and cosplay for this ultimate disc golf event at Skull Ranch and in partnership with iHemp Manufacturing. Tony, do you want to tell us a little of the details? I know we're still working out a few of the kinks and we're still working on a few things there, but do you want to talk about the event a little bit?
So, we figure people relate to tournaments. It's a big driver for that cash prize. And, just like a regular golf tournament, people love to just get outside and do something fun. And they love that competitive spirit and relating to one another. In this case, we wanted to do something just a little bit different. And the fact that Skull Ranch is a top rated per UDisc in terms of a private disc golf course and the amazing, beautiful landscapes that surround it, we wanted to see what we could do to kick it up a notch and take it to another level. Why not just make the whole thing a little bit more interesting and making it cosplay centric, which is obviously something very, very popular. I like going to Comic-Con. That's a load of fun. So why couldn't we do that and throw some discs at the same time? The idea of cosplay, mixing that with disc golf for our community made a whole lot of sense. And it was just something different, off the cuff. It was an idea we threw that has seemed to stick and haven't been able to find one anywhere else in the country. If you're going to be outdoors in a very unique place, especially with a first of its kind event, why not go as far as you can with it and incorporate cannabis, cosplay, and some good old ingenuity and some disc chucking fun?
And it really is. I can vouch for the fact that disc golfers and people in general love to come out here. They love to play this course. We're really out in the middle of nowhere, and it gives people kind of that opportunity to kind of let go of things a little bit,
Yeah, if somebody can make the Impossible Burger, then we can make a plant-based disc. Again, socialize with our people and find more ways to connect and communicate and share and commune on the same level. And by doing it, it meets a lot of those new ESG initiatives on top of it. So it's just a different way to do it and have some fun. Because why settle for the mundane when you can go to Skull Ranch and get disc connected?
I love it. I love it. And so on that note, let me say too that to our audience, if you're interested in learning more about the disc golf event, I want you to go out to www.get-disc hemp-connected.com, and I'm going to flash that up on the screen here so you can take a look at it. But we're putting together the details, we're putting together everything, and that website is going to be where you can go and take a look at all the new information that we're going to put out there. Right now we are shooting for an August 20th, I think, 20th and 21st date. Does that sound correct, Tony?
Yep, the third Saturday and Sunday in August.
Fantastic. Well, this is all the time that we have for this particular conversation. I absolutely cannot wait until next month when we get an opportunity to talk to Bo Whitney at the NCIA and learn more about those hemp-related economics. And in the meantime, Tony and I are going to be right here next month with this next new episode of Herbonomics on Cannabis Tech. So thanks so much for joining in. And again, Tony, thanks for joining us here.
You're certainly welcome. Now we know a little bit more about what the fox does say. So tune in, turn it on, and turn it up.